On a chilling February evening in 2008, a desperate 911 call pierced the silence. Rebecca Fenton, in evident distress, reported discovering her husband motionless in their Florida residence. "I've just returned from the gym, and it seems my home's been invaded. My husband, I fear he's been shot," she relayed. As authorities arrived at the residence, they were met with a grim scene. Larry Fenton lay cold, lifeless near the entrance, clear indications of gunshot wounds marking him. While Rebecca's profound grief seemed palpable, and as tears streamed down her face while conversing with officers and neighbors alike, a startling shift transpired. As cameras rolled and the media spotlight intensified, her anguish mysteriously evaporated, replaced with laughter and an unsettling casual demeanor. Amid a now spiraling whirlwind of speculation, police took Rebecca into the station for questioning. Through the interrogation's maze, she lamented, "Regardless of the evidence you find, the undeniable truth is he's gone. But if it helps find who did this?" Stay with us as we unravel the perplexing duality of Rebecca Fenton's reactions and delve deeper into a case that's captivated many. What really happened that fateful day? Let's uncover this together. The initial discovery. On that fateful cold February evening in 2008, the tranquility of a typical Florida residence was shattered, a stark contrast to the usual peaceful atmosphere and safety it represented. In this unsuspecting suburban backdrop, Rebecca Fenton, returning from a regular evening at the gym, found herself in the midst of a scene that would forever alter the course of her life. It was a moment that transformed the familiar into the surreal, the safe haven of her home into a scene of a crime. The sight that greeted her was one of stark horror. Her husband, Larry Fenton, lay motionless, his body a silent testament to a sudden and brutal act. The apparent gunshot wounds that marred his form spoke volumes of the violence that found its way into their home, an intrusion that was as unexpected as it was violent. Reeling from the shock of this discovery, Rebecca's immediate reaction was to seek help. With hands likely trembling and her heart racing, she reached for the phone and dialed 911. The call, a blend of her personal distress and the urgency of the situation, was a poignant cry for assistance. As she spoke to the operator, her voice conveyed not just the shock of discovering her husband in such a state, but also her deep-seated fear and confusion. She expressed her suspicion of a possible home invasion, a scenario that would suggest a random act of violence disrupting their peaceful domestic life. This suspicion, communicated in her quivering voice, painted a vivid picture of possible forced entry and confrontation, a scenario fraught with danger and uncertainty. Her account of the situation, despite being brief, was heavy with implications. The mention of a home invasion hinted at a narrative of random violence, while her observation of gunshot wounds on her husband's body pointed towards a specific cause of harm. These initial details provided by Rebecca were pivotal in setting the direction for the police investigation. As the law enforcement officers received this information, the sparse yet significant details of her call laid the groundwork for what would become a complex and multi-layered investigation, initiating a series of actions and inquiries that would seek to unravel the events of that tragic night. At first glance, it appeared to be a straightforward case of a home invasion gone tragically wrong. However, Rebecca Fenton's specific mention of a shooting in her frantic emergency call carried significant implications for the ensuing investigation into the death of her husband, Larry Fenton. By indicating that he might have been shot, she introduced a critical element into the case: the use of a firearm. This detail not only set a grave and serious tone for the incident, but also shaped the direction of the forensic examination and the broader inquiry into the nature of the attack. In criminal investigations, the use of a firearm typically suggests premeditation or a heightened level of intent, differentiating the incident from other types of violent attacks that might occur in the heat of the moment. This distinction is crucial for law enforcement as it guides their approach to the investigation, influencing everything from the allocation of resources to the types of specialists brought onto the case. Forensically, the mention of a shooting provided a clear starting point for investigators. Ballistic analysis, an essential component of forensic science in cases involving firearms, could yield a wealth of information. This includes determining the type of weapon used, the trajectory of the bullets, and potentially linking the bullets or casings found at the scene to a specific firearm. Such information is invaluable in reconstructing the events of the crime, offering clues about the shooter's position, the number of shots fired, and whether the shooting occurred during a struggle or from a distance. Furthermore, gunshot residues testing would become a key aspect of the forensic examination. GSR analysis can reveal whether a person has recently fired a weapon, which could be pivotal in either corroborating or contesting Rebecca's account of the incident. If GSR was found on her clothing or hands, it would raise serious questions about her involvement. Conversely, its absence might support her assertion of having just discovered the scene. Beyond the technicalities of ballistic and residue analysis, the nature of the shooting also had implications for understanding the dynamics of the crime. The use of a firearm often suggests a certain level of planning and determination. It could indicate that the attacker was intent on causing serious harm or ensuring that their victim did not survive. This aspect of the investigation would lead detectives to consider possible motives and suspects who had both the means and the intent to commit such a deliberate act of violence. In exploring potential motives, investigators would likely delve into Larry and Rebecca Fenton's personal and professional lives. They would scrutinize their relationships, financial records, and any recent conflicts or significant events that might provide a motive for murder. The fact that the incident took place in the couple's home added a layer of complexity, suggesting that the attacker was either familiar with the victims or that the attack was highly targeted. The story of Larry and Rebecca. Larry and Rebecca's love story began later in life, a testament to the timeless nature of romance. Rebecca, in her late 30s, and Larry, experiencing the wisdom of his early 50s, found their lives intertwining in a setting that epitomizes health and vitality: a gym. It was in this unlikely place, amidst the backdrop of exercise equipment and fitness routines, that their paths crossed, igniting a spark that would quickly grow into a burning flame. Their connection was immediate and undeniable. As they both frequented the gym, what might have started as casual glances or brief exchanges soon blossomed into deeper conversations, revealing shared interests and mutual attraction. The gym, often a place where people work on their physical well-being, became the foundation for a growing emotional bond between the two. Rebecca Fenton, reflecting on the whirlwind romance, shared with Crime Watch Daily the rapid pace at which their relationship developed. "We did fall in love very quickly," she said, highlighting the intensity and depth of their connection. This swift and profound emotional connection marked the beginning of a serious commitment as they started discussing marriage remarkably early in their relationship. The speed of their relationship's progression is further underscored by Larry's proposal just 3 months after they began dating. They were married shortly thereafter. The crime scene. Upon their arrival at the Fenton residence on that February evening, authorities found Larry Fenton lifeless near the entrance of his home. The stark reality of his condition was undeniable. He had succumbed to visible gunshot wounds, an unambiguous sign of a violent encounter. The placement of his body near the entrance suggested a sudden, possibly unexpected confrontation, hinting at little opportunity for defense or escape. The scene itself bore the chaotic hallmarks of a violent crime. The proximity of Larry's body to the entrance indicated that the attack may have occurred shortly after his encounter with the assailant, possibly as he was entering or exiting his home. The nature and number of gunshot wounds were critical. Each one could potentially tell a story: the distance from which they were fired, the angle of the shots, and the sequence of events leading up to the final, fatal moment. These details, crucial for forensic experts, would provide a silent testimony to the nature of the attack. Meanwhile, Rebecca Fenton's reaction to the horrific discovery of her husband further complicated the emotional landscape of the scene. To the responding officers and the neighbors who had gathered, her grief was palpable. She appeared deeply distraught, a picture of a wife overwhelmed by the sudden loss of her partner. Her interactions with both the officers and neighbors were marked by visible anguish, a reaction that, under normal circumstances, would align with the expectations of someone who had just discovered a loved one in such a tragic state. However, the authenticity of her emotional display would soon come under scrutiny. In situations of sudden and violent loss, reactions can vary widely, and while initial displays of grief are common, investigators are trained to observe and consider these reactions within the broader context of the case. Rebecca's outward expression of sorrow, while initially aligning with a typical response to trauma, would eventually become a point of analysis in understanding her role and relationship to the incident. The crime scene itself offered a snapshot into the final moments of Larry Fenton's life. Were there signs of an intruder, or did the evidence suggest a more personal altercation? Each aspect of the scene would require careful examination. Furthermore, the forensic investigation would extend beyond the physical evidence. Ballistic experts would analyze the gunshot wounds for caliber, trajectory, and distance. Trace evidence, such as hair, fibers, or fingerprints, could offer additional clues. The layout of the home, the points of entry and exit, and even the routines of the Fenton household would all become relevant as investigators sought to piece together the events that led to this tragic outcome. In the days and weeks following the discovery of Larry Fenton's body, the investigation would continue to unravel the layers of this case. From the forensic analysis of the crime scene to the scrutiny of personal relationships and motives, each step would bring law enforcement closer to understanding the true nature of what transpired in the Fenton home. The initial scene, with its stark depiction of loss and the complex web of emotional responses it evoked, would remain a focal point in the quest for truth and justice in the wake of a disturbing and tragic event. The shift. The case involving Rebecca Fenton took a perplexing turn as the media began to focus on the unfolding events. As the spotlight intensified, a striking change was observed in Rebecca's demeanor, a shift that would add a layer of complexity to the investigation and public perception of the incident. Initially portrayed as a grief-stricken widow, her behavior morphed in a way that confounded onlookers and investigators alike. As the cameras rolled and the eyes of the public were fixed upon her, the profound sorrow that once seemed to engulf her appeared to dissipate, replaced by reactions that seemed incongruent with the tragic circumstances she was embroiled in. This alteration in behavior was not just subtle, it was dramatic and noticeable. Rebecca, who had earlier been seen visibly distraught, began to exhibit a demeanor that was markedly different. Instances of laughter and a seemingly casual attitude in the aftermath of her husband's violent death struck many as unusual and disconcerting. This behavioral shift raised questions about the authenticity of her initial emotional response and, by extension, her overall involvement in the incident. The public, often quick to form opinions based on observable behavior, especially in high-profile cases, took note of this change. The transformation of Rebecca's demeanor under the relentless gaze of the media did not go unnoticed. Her actions, captured and replayed across various platforms, became the subject of intense scrutiny and speculation. The community and the wider audience began to ponder the possibility of a facade, a mask that was slipping as the media attention grew. The questions were inevitable. Was her initial display of grief genuine? Could this drastic change in behavior indicate something more sinister beneath the surface? In the realm of criminal investigations, the behavior of those closest to the victim is often a critical component of the inquiry. While there is no standard way for individuals to grieve or react to traumatic events, significant deviations from expected emotional responses can draw the attention of law enforcement. Rebecca's laughter and casual demeanor in the midst of a situation typically associated with shock and mourning became points of interest for the investigators. They had to consider whether these reactions were signs of a coping mechanism, a result of psychological shock, or indicators of guilt and a lack of remorse. For the detectives working on the case, this behavioral shift necessitated a deeper exploration into Rebecca's psyche and her relationship with Larry Fenton. It prompted questions about the dynamics of their marriage, potential motives for foul play, and her psychological profile. The investigation would need to look beyond the immediate physical evidence at the crime scene and delve into the more nuanced aspects of human behavior and interpersonal relationships. Moreover, the role of the media in shaping public perception cannot be understated. The constant presence of cameras and the relentless coverage of Rebecca's every move and expression meant that her actions were subject to interpretation and misinterpretation. The media narrative, while bringing attention to the case, also had the power to influence public opinion, sometimes skewing the reality of the situation. As the investigation progressed, understanding the reasons behind Rebecca's changing demeanor became a crucial aspect of piecing together the events leading up to and following Larry Fenton's death. It raised the question of whether her behavior was a mask for deeper, darker secrets or a misunderstood response to an unimaginably traumatic event. This aspect of the case, intertwined with the factual evidence gathered, would prove to be significant in unraveling the truth behind a scenario that had quickly evolved from a personal tragedy to a subject of public intrigue and speculation. The Interrogation and Investigation. When Rebecca Fenton was brought into the police station for questioning regarding the tragic death of her husband, Larry Fenton, the case took a turn into deeper investigative territory. Her interrogation was pivotal, not only for the information it might yield about the night of the incident, but also for the insights it would provide into her psychological state and potential involvement. Her demeanor and statements during this questioning period were crucial in piecing together the events that led to her husband's demise. As Rebecca sat across from the detectives, her responses and overall demeanor conveyed a complex mixture of emotions. On one hand, there was a palpable sense of resignation to the stark reality of her husband's death. This resignation could be interpreted in several ways: as a natural response to loss, a sign of detachment, or more ominously, as an indicator of guilt. On the other hand, she expressed a willingness to assist in the investigation, to help find the person responsible for her husband's shooting. This apparent eagerness to aid in the investigation added another layer to her already enigmatic persona. The interrogation of Rebecca Fenton was far from straightforward. Detectives faced the challenge of deciphering her statements, which were shrouded in a mix of grief and composure. The way she recounted the events of the night, her recollection of details, and her reactions to probing questions were all under scrutiny. Her narrative needed to be carefully assessed for consistency, emotional authenticity, and factual accuracy. Another layer of complexity in the interrogation was the need to reconcile Rebecca's statements with the physical evidence gathered at the crime scene. Investigators had to meticulously compare her account of the events with forensic findings, looking for corroborations or discrepancies. This comparison was critical in establishing the credibility of her statements and her possible involvement in the crime. The puzzling nature of Rebecca's reactions, her shifting demeanor from grief to casualness, and now a composed willingness to assist in the investigation, posed a significant challenge for the investigators. Furthermore, the detectives had to navigate the delicate task of interrogating a potential suspect who was also a grieving widow. They needed to balance the pursuit of truth with the sensitivity required in such situations. The interrogation process thus required a blend of tactical questioning, emotional intelligence, and keen observation. As the questioning progressed, it became increasingly clear that solving the case would require more than just piecing together a timeline of events. It demanded an in-depth understanding of Rebecca's relationship with her husband, their marital dynamics, and any underlying issues that might not be immediately apparent. The detectives had to delve into the couple's past, looking for motives, conflicts, or any other factors that could shed light on the circumstances leading to Larry Fenton's death. The duality in behavior. Initially, in the aftermath of discovering her husband Larry Fenton's lifeless body, Rebecca exhibited profound grief. This response, characterized by visible distress and sorrow, seemed consistent with the expected reaction of someone who had just encountered a traumatic and personal loss. Her tears and apparent anguish resonated with the onlookers and authorities, painting her as a victim of a tragic circumstance. However, this display of grief was soon juxtaposed with a demeanor that appeared startlingly carefree. As the media attention around the case grew, Rebecca's behavior shifted noticeably. Complicating the interpretation of Rebecca's emotional state was the undeniable influence of media presence and public scrutiny. The involvement of media in criminal cases often brings a different dynamic to how individuals involved in the case are perceived and how they behave. The constant presence of cameras and the knowledge that one's actions are being closely monitored and broadcasted can significantly alter a person's behavior. For Rebecca, the awareness of being under public scrutiny might have led to altered behavior, potentially causing her actions to be misunderstood or misinterpreted by the audience. The media's portrayal of her reactions also played a role in shaping public opinion, which can often be swayed by how information and behaviors are framed and presented. Moreover, the media's influence extends beyond the individual to the investigation itself. The constant media coverage can create pressure on investigators and influence the direction of the investigation. It can lead to heightened public expectations for quick resolutions, potentially impacting the thoroughness and objectivity of the investigation process. The Rebecca Fenton case, entangled in a web of uncertainties and complexities, leaves behind a trail of unanswered questions that continue to baffle both the authorities and the public. Central to the mystery is the crucial question: what truly transpired on that fateful day? Was Rebecca Fenton merely a grieving widow engulfed in an unimaginable tragedy, or did her actions indicate a more sinister role in her husband's untimely death? This dichotomy presents a challenging puzzle, one that demands a meticulous and multifaceted approach to investigation. In the case of Larry Fenton's death, forensic details such as the trajectory of the bullets, the patterns of blood splatter, and any trace evidence at the crime scene could provide critical information. These elements help reconstruct the events of the crime, offering clues about the shooter's position, the sequence of events, and the nature of the encounter. Equally important in this intricate investigation is the analysis of Rebecca's behavior. Behavioral analysis can offer insights into Rebecca's state of mind before, during, and after the incident, potentially revealing motivations, deceptions, or psychological trauma. Further complicating the case is the role of public scrutiny. The presence of media and the consequent public attention can significantly influence an individual's behavior. Additionally, the impact of sudden grief cannot be underestimated. The way individuals cope with loss, especially one as traumatic as the death of a spouse, can manifest in a range of behaviors, some of which may appear contradictory or unexpected. Understanding these nuances is crucial in determining whether Rebecca's actions were a reflection of genuine grief and shock, or if they masked a more calculated intent. Despite her initial display of grief and shock, inconsistencies in her story and behavior raised suspicions. Forensic evidence, along with the circumstantial factors surrounding the case, eventually led to Rebecca's arrest and prosecution. In 2014, Rebecca Fenton was convicted of first-degree murder in the death of her husband and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The conviction was largely based on the cumulative weight of the circumstantial evidence, as there were no direct witnesses to the crime. The case is often cited as an example of how complex criminal investigations can lead to a resolution, even when direct evidence is limited. Join the conversation. Drop a comment to share your thoughts and insights. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more captivating content. Thanks for tuning in to Really Unreal. Join us tomorrow as we delve into the intricate case of concealed identity surrounding the disappearance of Nicholas Barclay. Will we discover that he was reunited with his family only a few years after vanishing? Tune in to find out. Stay curious, stay connected, stay with Really Unreal.